Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am in the Boston area today in New England, where we are getting slammed with the blizzard. So if you hear any background noise, those are snow plows and snow blowers. Today, I'm really excited to have with us Leonoor Koomen, who is based in the Netherlands. And today she's going to talk to us about 5 lessons she's learned from working with executives during Agile Transformation. So I'm Patricia Kong, very happy to have Leonor today here with us. And why don't we get started? So next slide, please, Lindsay. So just quick guidelines as usual. Your microphones are going to be muted throughout, but obviously we want you to ask questions. Any questions relating to what Leonor and I are going to talk about today, but also about her experience dealing with executives, dealing with leaders, what kind of requests she gets, what are your struggles, little asks like that, because even if we don't get them all covered today, there's going to be a replay of this obviously after, and we'll get a chance to address those even after the webinar, post-webinar. Next slide, please. There we are. So who is Scrum.org? Scrum.org obviously is founded by Ken Schraderer, who's the co-creator of the Scrum framework. And we work through training, education, and certification. So we do that a lot through community. We have a community of, I think, almost 300 professional Scrum trainers who are all around the world, and they provide training. And obviously we have certification assessments where people can assess their knowledge of the Scrum framework. Go onto our website, there's a lot of information there. Obviously, you don't need to take the training to assess yourself for certification. There is a little bit of a new thing that I do want to point out here, though, is if you look on the training, you'll see that there's another PSPO Advanced. That's a new class, and there's a new assessment really focused around product management and for advanced product ownership topics. So that's something that's new that we recently released that might be interesting for you. All right, let's get started in talking to Leonor. So next slide, please. I'm going to ask Leonor to introduce herself, but Leonor and I actually met earlier this year, right, Leonor? We met at the conference. Was it in Germany that we met?
So we've met several times, but this year also, I think last year we met in Munich, this year in Amsterdam.
Yeah. The first time, though, all the years now and trips are blending. So it was in Munich, right? That's Germany, Agile Germany. And so Leonor and I were both speakers, and we're getting into topics in Agile that we're passionate about. And I was asking her, I said, so Leonor, do you want to share any of this information? And that's how I got her to come and talk to us about all these experiences so that we can help improve the lives for all of us who are in this industry and for the people that we work with. So enough of me. Leonor, do you want to give yourself an introduction?
Thanks. Yeah, sure. So my name is Leonoor Koomen. I always call myself an Agile nerd. I try to read everything and learn as much as I can about Scrum and Agile. I've been working for ING 20 years, and 2 years ago, I just suddenly woke up and thought, oh my, I might be dying as a banker, and I didn't want to do that. So I asked ING whether it was okay to do some of my own work as well, and that's how I came up with this beautiful deal that I have a part-time job with ING, training their executive boards and training and selecting their lead agile coaches. And apart from that, I have my own company where I help clients in all kinds of areas except for banking, because I truly love ING. So that's what I do. I do some public speaking, but most of all, I think I want to be the assistant in the mom. I want to be the girl that tries to get the paperwork of how an agile design is to actually come to life.
You also live in a farm.
Yeah.
I think that's really funny. She's agile by day, farming by night.
Well, that's not true. I'm not doing anything around the farming because, but we enjoy the space. Yeah, truly.
Okay. So next slide, please, Lindsay. So what we're going to go through today. So when Leonor and I were preparing for this to have this conversation, we said, you know what are some lessons that you've learned? And she gave us 9, but we went with the top 5. And so they're here now, and what we're going to do is go through each one of these in a conversation. There's not going to be too much, there's not going to be several slides. This is a lot of conversation between her and me. So in no particular order, break silos. The second one you have is leaders should lead the change as heads of impediments. Show management the big picture, show it to them again. An agile culture needs clarity and patience. And then number 5, everyone needs a compelling goal, and it is not a number. So those are the 5 that we're going to start with. And let's get started. So next slide. So if we were to talk about breaking silos, Leonor, what do you mean by that? Why is that important when we're working in an agile transformation? And why particularly when we think about executives, is that an important point to bring up?
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. I want silos to be broken on all levels of the organization. But I think if you want to stop local optimization, and I truly think we need to do that within an organization, then I want the leaders to go first. I train so many executive teams where the CEO says, if I do that, then he has a problem. And with he's meaning the CFO, as if they're not in one shop, right? So I want everybody to act in the interest of the whole organization, to prioritize without the egos and without the roles instead. And what I think is really important is that we have the team over the individual. We have the domain over the teams, and we have the company's best interest over the domain's best interest. And I think having that conversation all over again on all levels of the organization actually helps to get the organization achieve better results.
So how do you have that conversation? Do you have it? Is it a conversation you said throughout the organization? Is it, you're having that with the teams and the leaders, or are you having it with everybody at the same time again and again? What does that look like?
So there are different conversations at different levels. There's stuff you can do about that. One is you should stop the target setting in the silos, right? You want a target set that cover the whole organization's goal and not necessarily within one silo. And also you should stop rewarding and stop enabling performance that is just trying to become the best within your silo. I meet a lot of people where they say, I just want to be the best product in the company. And I don't want the leaders to deliver the best product in the company because that's within the company, right? So, so we have to show a different behavior. And that also means that we have to have clear what is it the company is going for. And I know we're going to talk about that later on.
Yeah, that's actually something that I'm looking at a lot with my colleague Kurt Bittner, is really thinking about in terms of organizational design, how does that relate to reward systems and, just the way that we are engineered as humans. What does that mean? And how do you get through those egos? So that's an interesting thing. If I can get you to flip to the next slide, Lindsay, just because we have some nice drawings. They don't. Instead of the list. But this is really cute because it actually talks about, when you were talking, it's what I had in mind about breaking silos. Before we get on to the next point, what has that looked like when you've been at a company? Have you been able to really break those silos? What makes it hard? What will make it a little bit easier?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you have to do is be aware of the fact that is how you have been talking for a long time, that is suboptimal for the outcome for the organization as a whole. So being aware that there's wording used which says we and them, within the same company, those are the easy signals that there's some room for improvement there. And it's also the more you storytell around what is the organization going for as a whole, the more compelling that is, the easier it is to just live with the fact that your product might not have the major focus of the company right now. And it also means that people should be able to, we have a lot of product managers who are, or leaders who are responsible for one big product. And if that product suddenly is not the #1 priority of the company, that is of course a little bit painful. But we should talk about it, understand the why, and still see the value in stepping back a little bit, because currently the focus is different.
And then in your own experience at a company, have you seen this work well?
Yes, I've seen it work well, and I've seen it work not so well. And I think it's also, well, of course, it depends on the culture. If your culture is really focused on being the best yourself, that is not necessarily in the best interest of the company. So in the Tribal Leadership book, they talk about I am great, and by the way, you are not. If that is part of the culture, that is in the way of achieving whatever the company can. And so, yes, you have to be aware of it, aware of the wording that is used, and constantly have the conversation of having the whole company in the interest of everybody, and not just one department, one team. So the risk of making new silos in an agile organization is still there. If you have an awesome team with an awesome product owner, you can suddenly think your product is the most important thing for the company, and maybe that's not the case. So we have to be a little modest there and have conversations around it without breaking the enthusiasm of people.
Yeah, and I can see how these points are going to relate together, because I was thinking about, when we think about breaking silos, obviously some of the outcomes that we're looking for is, you're talking about communication and transparency, right? But the notion that we're tying this back into really what is the goal that we're trying to pursue as an organization, and how do we get enthusiasm around that, whether it's, my product as a product owner, product manager, or your product as a product owner. How do we start to have those conversations and just switch a little bit of the behavior and thinking? Although easier said than done, but thank you for sharing that with us. Let's talk about leaders as owners of impediments. So what do you mean there?
When I go into a new organization for me and I talk to the executive team and I say, so what are your top 5 priorities? They struggle with the 5, right? They usually know the 25 top priorities, but at least they know them. But when I ask them, so what is the stuff that is in the way of your people being able to deliver the best they can, then it's usually quite quiet. Because we simply do not know. It's not very, very fun to look at the things that breaks our flow, but I think it's truly really important to talk about it. And I want leaders to understand about what's in the way of delivering the best the teams in their organization can do.
When you start to get them into the mindset of, I see myself as accountable for the improvement of this organization, right? I help to remove impediments. Who do they work with? How do they take that on? Is it sometimes Scrum Masters they're working with, or is it another management team, or is it an Agile team? There's so many ways that I've seen this done where the leader goes, okay, I own the impediments now. Now I delegate that to this group here.
Yeah.
And I want to see what that looks like for you.
So I think it's really important that if we have a problem in the team and we know how to fix it, let's fix it. Let's take that ownership and that accountability to work on that. And in large organization, if you can't fix it within your own team, you probably have a team that you're close to, or that they do activities related to yours. So let's call it a family of teams, and you just find this family of scrums, and you just find you try to find the answer in the organization. So I don't want leaders to take over problems that teams can handle themselves. And I know for sure teams don't like that either, right? That's nitty-gritty meddling. But if there are impediments that are truly in the way of many teams or one team, but they can't solve it themselves, I really, really want the teams to be able to do this up the line and actually ask for help for the senior leaders. And the way I would like them to handle it is just like any other task board for any other Scrum team. and just commit to the task and get it, dealt with as soon as possible, get it done as soon as possible.
I was working with this organization, and they had multiple Scrum teams, and they had multiple nexuses going. So what they did was they saw the same problems coming up always in their retrospectives, and it was really something that could only be addressed because of pretty structural and financial reasons, something that had to be addressed by management, right, by leadership. And it would come up and up and up again, and they had it on this backlog. But yet, then the leadership knew that, but they weren't doing it. Meaning they weren't addressing it. They would say, you know what, we'll look at that, we'll take care of it. A lot of the times when leaders say, we want this sort of, we accept it. We accept that the teams are working in this agile way, or they're using Scrum or whatever. And we want this agile transformation. We're going through that too. What I think is that sometimes leaders see themselves as above this change that's going on. So they say, okay, they're doing this thing, I'm here, that's good. We're doing this transformation, we're going to get better. I need more ROI, let's say that. Fair enough. But when you start to tie that conversation together, when you start to say, why are you doing this? What do leaders ask you about the most? What question do you get asked the most by leaders about, this agile transformation, what it means to them? Because I think there's a disconnect on what this means to get them so that we're actually all a team working together.
Yeah, so I get a lot the question, so how do I know whether I have the right people in my organization? I think that is what leaders ask me the most. And they don't always ask me, how do I know whether I am the right leader, to be honest, but they're really focused on how do I know, and it's a fair question, how do I know whether I have the right people for this organizational change that I want to go through? But I think the good news, and I always say that I'm a huge believer in people, and I've been in many situations, and I always see that sometimes you see behavior you don't really think is very helpful for the transformation, but it's not that the people don't want to. It's maybe because we learned them something different in the past. It's maybe there's something in their way that's their concern. So we should have the conversation about how can we show up in a better behavior every day, not only on the team level, but also on the executive level.
Yeah, as a human level, right? Because they're humans too, which is one of the points that you want to make sure that we stress is that they're people too, because so often it becomes a me versus you, and we know the differences.
They're people
too. So they're people too, okay? And we're working on this together, and if we're working in this way, then we're looking at inspecting and adapting, right? So what about feedback for leaders then? If they're working on impediments, if hopefully, things are starting to work in some of the situations, the situation I brought up, I'm not sure that there was really a healthy feedback loop in terms of, giving feedback to leaders. It's hard for everyone to have feedback and what to do with it. So is that something that you work on with some of the execs?
Yes, definitely. I think feedback is hard everywhere. There's also a large cultural component in there. So in some cultures, it's even more difficult. I always say we Dutch, we're close to the rudest people in the world, right? And still feedback is difficult here too, because we are so afraid of breaking the relationship that we think we can afford not to give the feedback. We think we have the luxury of affording not to give the feedback to continuously improve just because we want to play nice. And I think that is something we definitely need to deal with. We can never be a continuous improving organization if we do not have the conversation about, I expected something else from you here today. And that is as difficult for members in the team as it is for leadership. But also, I think for leadership, there also applies. So if they come across something that they don't like as leaders, So let's say it's an impediment or it's a mistake that somebody makes. If they react on it too, if they overreact on that, then people will never come again. And people will never show up with their impediments or their problems or their failures. And that is also a huge responsibility, because that will also be in the way of being better every day.
Yeah, I think the Dutch are great at giving feedback. At least the ones that I
No,
work
we're not.
with.
We just say it sucks.
Yeah, that was bad. Oh. um, I love that you're talking about what we, what you're trying to afford, what's the cost versus, the benefit of not giving that feedback. And I think that sometimes it's being nice and sometimes being scared, right? Like, and this is where you have to have the courage to give feedback, but you also have to make sure that that person is ready to take that feedback. A lot of the times people get unsolicited feedback, and that's very annoying. So there has to be, because it's just like, it's like that. It's like, you suck. And then it's like, and now what?
So, but that's not feedback, right?
Right. Or, I really think you could have done better. And there's always that the feeling of attack. So that has to be done in a smart way. But the notion of fear that if I give feedback to my boss or, my leader, I could get fired, right? So let's just play this game, and then we'll sit there and we'll talk about how this person doesn't know. So there's really a large psychological component behind that around, fear, safety, but also around, we could talk about accountability. So having the clear accountability and, like you said, responsibility of what am I here to do and take care of, and I think that's important.
But I also think, in my experience, I learned that senior leaders can handle feedback really, really well. It's just that we're very cautious in trying it, but overall, I think they can handle it really well.
Shall we talk about the how we can scare leaders by talking about failing fast? You have to fail fast, leader.
Yes. Yeah.
I know one of the things that you said is that, obviously we talk about failing fast, and then when you throw that at a leader, can you talk about how they handle this term and what that might mean to them?
Yeah. So I think the failing fast thing became a bit of a myth. It became like you can do whatever you like and it doesn't matter, the good news is you've learned something, and that for leaders is really scary. And the reason why it's scary is because they have concerns for their reputation. There are some clients of me who say, well, if we make a mistake here, we lose people's lives. So we have to talk about what kind of risk are we willing to take. And we might be able to break our own rules as an organization and experiment a little bit there, but we're not about to break the law. And we're not about to break the safety areas. So that means that it differs in each situation, because some clients can take more risk because their products, they're not in a highly regulated world. And some clients have to be very careful there. And we need to talk about it. What we do know for sure is that even though we don't allow for failing, it still happens. And if we hide that, then we can't learn from that. So we have to find a balance in there.
Yeah, that's a big balance of failing, risk, quality, ethics. Like you said, like pharmaceuticals, right? There's a very different result or outcome versus, we know Volkswagen, when they put in a little bit more diesel so they could pass the test, that's a question about ethics. It doesn't hurt anybody today, right? We can talk about other things in the future, but there's all these things that people try. And I would count those as failures. So let's move on, because we have 3 more points, and I have a couple of questions that I'd like to get in, and there's some that are coming in. Can you flip to the next slide, please, Lindsay? So let's start with the third one, the big picture. Talk about the big picture, what you mean, and what happens when we don't do that, which is what we see a lot.
So what I love about it is I think we all we want our leaders to see at a different altitude at their company. We don't want them to be like very, very, close into the details. But we are all aware that an organization is complex, which means it's a living system. So that means we have to have focus on that big picture and keep having track on where is the big picture going as a whole.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions that came in is it's around the organization's goal, which I'll say is related to the big picture. So if we have multiple departments, if we have multiple, let's say, lines of business or just multiple areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who is who? And I think I know your answer, but who is the person that would be trying to get everyone aligned? So who would be trying to work through the personal agendas of these different departments? How do you get those kind of all aligned and focused around the big picture? And then when you see, there's this people who are holding out against this notion of, you know what, we used to just look at ourselves individually. Now we're going to look at ourselves together for this big picture, this idea that we have. And you see, resistance. How would you deal with that? And who do you think should be empowered in the organization to do that?
So I think we all have shared ownership when it comes to, if we don't work very well as a team, we compromise the product that we deliver or the service that we deliver as a company. And I do think that conversation about having the big picture in mind and should be data-driven, like evidence-based management, but also it should be facilitated really well. Because it's something that is easier to observe from somebody who has like a coach role or somebody who's close enough to the team to understand what their concern and the considerations are, but far away enough for the team to actually mirror them on the behavior and the lack of having the big picture in mind.
The part that I've seen where this doesn't work well is when we now have all these directors of Agile, and they're going to do this. What I love about what you're saying is, there should be people, and they might be coaches, consultants, but they come in and they're observing this system of how it works together. And so they're talking to the teams, they're talking to the leaders, they're seeing how they can move everything together. What I think doesn't work is usually when we have all of a sudden this like agility board or something like that, and it goes, you must do this, and there are the processes, without having some sort of running feet in the ground. Because obviously when we're trying to do these kind of things, it's in the name of value. And so if everybody can get kind of chimed around that, and are we trying to improve in actually what we're delivering? I think those are great things. So let's talk about clarity and patience. Why is that one of your lessons learned?
So I think when we go for a cultural shift, we just suddenly decided to dance a different dance. If we want to go to agility, we want people to suddenly do something that they never done before, and even worse, we never wanted them to do that before, like using their autonomy. So we have to be a little patient about how long it takes for people to actually be excited about this new dance, to learn the rhythm. We have to keep storytelling and say, what does success look like for this agile organization? Why are we transforming? And it became such a fashion thing to do agile, because suddenly everybody does it and everybody has a Scrum teams. But we need to talk about, what do you need to get that done effectively? And I think we need role models there. We need to reward in a different way. And it's literally, if you want to get to the castle, you have to swim the moat. And that's not the fun part about it, right? It's not that suddenly you have a full cultural shift. You have to be a little patience there. And also, you have to be willing to give up stuff that you maybe really appreciated in former times, like the boards you were talking about, like the value chain meetings, the way you did individual KPIs or bonuses. So if you want to go for a big shift, then you have, well, you are in for the long run. And you should make it fun in the meantime, otherwise it will be really hard.
There's a term that we have. It's called sucker for punishment. Sometimes this is what this feels like, right? It's continuously going over and over. But I was doing a webinar, hosting a webinar with two gentlemen from Stack Sports, and I think they had a great kind of almost 3, 4, and 5 in a cycle where they said, you know, we got to show them the why, the big picture, why we're doing this, and we're gonna do stuff, and then we gotta show them the result and show them the big picture again, right? Like why, how we kept on doing that. So it's that consistent feedback of what's been happening since we've been trying to go down this path. Because, you know, when people are trying to pursue something like Agile Transformation, I find that it's yes, it's trendy, or it's something that's come from the teams where they're pursuing Agile. But when there's something like there's an initiative around a transformation, I found that it's usually because their back is against the wall and they need to innovate and they're trying to sustain their business. So, you know, in a time of fear, you know, clarity and patience is very, very important. Yeah. So number 5, compelling goals. Compelling goals in terms of, do you mean compelling goals for lessons learned? Like make sure we have compelling goals for our products, make sure we have compelling goals around the transformation. Can you just talk about that more?
So I think we all just want to be inspired. And if somebody tells me, Leonor, we're going to do this because our goal is to get in the number X turnover, I don't care, right? I want to be inspired in a different way. I want to wow the client. I want to cure the patient. I want to do, you know, make an impact in the world. So I think we need to talk about what is a compelling why for people. And I would love it if we can connect it to why we set our alarm tomorrow to go to the office. Because if it's like beautiful world peace kind of thing, you know, that you're not against it, you want it too, but you don't know how to contribute to it, then it feels like it's not your why. And I see a lot of whys when I come in the office and I see this beautiful, like, you know, world peace thing on the wall, or I see a behavior on the wall, but it's written on the wall, but it's not real. So we have to make sure that the why is real for everybody. And yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, I know how it looks to see a company where the why isn't real. Like you said, you know, they've spent a lot of money. They have this really cool mission or slogan, and I've asked them, you know, what's the vision of the company? Why are you guys doing things? And they couldn't tell me, but they took me out to the pretty picture and showed me what they were doing. What does it feel like when the reverse is true? How do you know when the why is real in your experience?
I think if the why is real for people, you will see a passion and an engagement to the work that you've never seen before. You see the willingness to help each other, because the why is so clear that you're willing to help each other to be successful. It's a kind of atmosphere. You can feel it when you're in the building. You can see the energy. You can see the way people are proud of the company, like the love brand of the company. And also, I think the more it is connected to what people do on a day-to-day basis, no matter where they are in the organization, the better they feel that like they're contributing to the big why as well. And so it's also about not having certain departments more important or more rewarded than others, but it's just seeing it as a joint effort and really acting as one collective.
Yeah, so that's and that ties back to what you were talking about before for me about the big picture, right? Tying those two together. So you brought it up earlier, not me. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is evidence-based management, right? So not just using gut-based management to go every direction, align ourselves and look at areas of value and how they affect each other when we're trying to improve. So when you talk about goals here, do you use, have you used any sort of data or do you use any sort of evidence, like information? How do you know when you're on this journey with a client or at a company, how do you know that they're actually moving toward these goals in a constructive way?
Yeah, so yes, definitely. I think metrics is in my day-to-day business. It's one of the most important ingredients in my toolkit as an agile coach. I think it's really important that we set our own bars for the metrics that we choose. And the excuse I get most is, yeah, we just don't know that, we don't have that data available. But there are very easy ways to collect the data. And so if you want to be faster, let's measure whether you're actually being faster. If your concern is about engaged people, let's measure how happy they currently are in their job. Let's not try to come up with a huge dashboard of 200 metrics. Let's find those that matter to us, set a bar, and really act on that if we don't like it.
I would add that if we're trying to go faster, let's figure out if we're going faster for the right reasons. And then that conversation about how we can actually get faster, that time to market is important. So
Sure.
we have a lot of questions coming in.
Okay.
Out of these, before we get to those, out of these 5 lessons, which one is the most important for you? If someone is listening to this or watching us have this conversation, which one would you say, you know what, start here?
Start with finding whether you have a joint goal. Find that out, because it's really that's what you definitely need to get in the right direction. That's my idea. What about yours? What do you think, Patricia?
I love it that you asked me. I really feel that having the goal and the big picture, to me, they're the same. But really, I would agree with you around having the goal, because when I think about having the goal, it helps me as an individual say, do I want to be a part of this? Do those people want to be a part of this with me? And when we think about the Scrum values, commitment for me is the first step in the door. So if you're committed, then all the other things matter. If you're not committed, then those things don't matter. So I agree with you around the committed goal. And then clarity and patience and all those other good things. All right, let's get through some questions that are coming in, and then I have a couple of questions for you too. So back to feedback. What's the best way to provide feedback, in your opinion, when you're working with a multi-cultural team? So when you're looking at respect, politeness, and where where you might find conflict and what that, well, that sounds like marriage, doesn't it? How do you
I don't know. I'm not married.
I am still married.
So I think, of course, there are ways of doing feedback well, and we should not feel too big to study that. So it's about the impact on you, and then, just little things that we need to teach each other on how to feedback. And just saying that you don't like it is not good enough. The second one is if the culture is too careful to have feedback indirectly. Let's find our simple ways of getting it in a different way. So maybe let's hang a poster near the coffee machine and just ask people feedback on what they like about their current job or what they don't like. And it's totally okay if they don't put their names in yet. Let's find first the areas that we want to improve, and then I'm really happy to see all the time that if you find the areas that people really want to improve, then you also find volunteers in the organization to work on that. But when it comes on feedback one-to-one, like in a relationship, in a team, you have, of course, the retrospective to work on that. But don't wait 14 days for something or 10 working days for something if you know right now you want a different behavior. So it's about role modeling. We want the leaders to go first. And that's not only about giving feedback, but also receiving it gracefully. I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, that's really great, because there's so many situations, like even when you put I saw this, Dutch people with French people, or Asian people with American people. It's very, very different. And what I found is a question around this is, besides, being graceful, as you mentioned, and already we have these things built into, for instance, in the Scrum events, is really thinking about safety. So what's worked for me is, having the working agreements, having those conversations about how we handle feedback. You might even have these conversations about introverts and extroverts. So great facilitation, like you talked about, and being aware of those things, because this is stereotypical, but an English person and a Chinese person are going to be very different in how they convey information, how they receive information. And I've seen that. And sometimes that's not asking you to change who you are, but it's just saying, be aware. And then what I've seen is great results where they said, oh, that was really interesting. We were able to learn more from your perspective, and also those things. But I've seen a working agreement work really well for that. Here's the next question for you. Have you ever experienced any success in challenging leaders by asking them, can you make your organizations the envy of other organizations by the way your groups demonstrate agile behaviors? Ooh, that's a strong question. I repeat it for you. Can you make your organization the envy of other organizations by the way your groups demonstrate agile behaviors?
I love that. So I think you can, but it should never be the goal. This is not about outperforming anybody else. I know there's a lot said about Spotify culture, ING culture, where I'm a part of too. And yes, there's good stuff in there. So the goal is not to be to make everybody else envious. I think the goal is to make such a great way of work together and have such beautiful results in both for the employees and the clients and everybody else, that it's truly fun to be there. And if it's truly fun, everybody will notice.
I know, because I think there's too much out there, like you said. People think we can just copy the Spotify model or the ING model and it's going to work for us. And some people, we don't know, what's actually inside there, and if it would work for us. Yeah. All right, next one. Would you approach an agile transformation like as a project with a company with a management Scrum team? So would you ever say, hey, our product or our thing that we're trying to create is an agile transformation or an agile transformation company, and have a team that's solely responsible for that?
No, I think I don't. What I do want to find out is, what are we trying to achieving? What would better look like? How do we measure that? And then, if you make it the idea of just the leadership, the executive board itself, then how you can actually make sure that it's really embedded in the organization. So yes, of course, you can make a roadmap. And you can make a plan and define the first steps that you want to achieve, but it's a joint effort. And I think just having the leadership team responsible for that whole thing will not work. But if the question implies can you do an agile transformation without the leadership being fully on board, that is a different question. I think it's really important. To be honest, I don't see all the time everybody really excited in the Exco about the Agile Transformation, but you need at least 2 or 3 key roles to be really excited, really in there to get this Agile Transformation in. But it's a journey, it's not a step, it's not a binary thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. And transformation, that word, it means you're transformed, right? So it means there's a beginning and an end. When we know that, for instance, if you're ever somebody who's going through, let's say, a physical transformation, there's not a beginning and an end. There's all the stuff in the middle, and there's all the stuff in the after to maintain their health and all the things that they're trying to do. So how do you talk about an agile transformation?
I don't use the word transformation. So I talk about the journey that we're on as an organization. And if that why is usually not because we want to be agile. That why is because we want a different result. And then we talk about, so how are we on this road to getting that different result in? And I know by experience that sometimes you have like a huge success, you're going in exactly the way with an organization where you hoped you would go. And then suddenly something happens, might be new regulations, might be new executive board member, it might be anything else. They bought a new company and they try to merge it, and then you're back at square one. And so there's not a moment in time where you can celebrate, ta-da, it's done. It's like constantly noticing the pulse of the organization and seeing whether you actually like what you see today.
Let me follow up with another question from there, because it's a good segue. So the pulse of the organization and what we're trying to do, do you think that pulse and everything that we're trying to do should be transparent to everyone? Because what we know is that when we're transparent, what we're going to do is expose the stuff that we need to fix, right? Do you think that it's better to just look at all those things at once, or and make that transparent to everybody? Or are we looking, do you usually try to go, let's start with something small first. Let's find one thing small and make that transparent and just do little bit by bit.
Well, I love transparency. I think if we want people to show up as if it's their own shop, then they should know what the concern of the shop is. I think we're, I hear a lot of executives talking about, I want my people to act as in a startup. Well, in a startup, you know exactly what the concern is, what you're going for, etc. And I think that a lot of managerial roles, and I used to be a manager in my career as well, is about not being transparent, about you have that position because you know stuff somebody else doesn't know. And I think that's in the way of a better result. But if you put everything on the wall today, how do we know where we need to steer on first? So I do see some examples where I go in and the company shows me their Obeya from Toyota, and then I see 250 metrics on the wall. If that's the case, then I don't know where to go first. So let's find some that matter to us. Let's set a bar and then actually see whether we can improve on those areas with a kata or any other.
Yeah. I mean, that seems really in line. I should have known, because the first thing was break silos.
There you go.
Expose everything, but you're saying let's start with where we can after that. Like, let's just expose. We understand why we're trying to do this, what we're trying to do. Okay, so that's fun. What do you do with people, with leaders who have been resistant to that? So you might get, for instance, one or two champions, but you will get, for sure, someone who's really into that command and control, right? That's what's gotten them there. Potentially they started the company's really big. They own 50% of the company, 51, right? So what is your advice for getting people, let's not even saying just exact, but getting people from this mindset of command and control over into servant leadership? And I don't know you before as a manager, but were there behaviors that in yourself you've changed even from that stance?
Sure. I think I think when I look at my own leadership, I don't envy a lot of people that reported to me in the past. I had some good years. I had some not so good years. It's all about I had to let go that it was my rank that allowed me to come up with new ideas. And usually you get the job as a manager because you were very good at the content of something, let's say sales. So you were good at sales, so you sold a lot of products, so we make you head of sales. And then you're doing other stuff because you're a manager now and you don't know the details of the work anymore. So that means even though you got the job because you were supposed to be an expert in this, maybe your knowledge is a little bit outdated. And that's painful, right? So I have a lot of, when I talk to command and control kind of leaders, and we are all that in a certain way, I think, it's usually because they really care. They care. And they really think that if they don't step in the what and the how, that the result for the company will be worse. So they're in there for the right reasons. It's just the behavior that we don't like. So some of them actually behave like a command and control leader because they were invited to do so for the past 20 years. And some of them truly believe that they know better, that they cannot trust their teams, and they're really scared of letting that go. And we have to have that conversation because it's not fair to people to just ask them to use their autonomy, but it's also not fair to leaders to just say, well, you just have to trust the teams. We have to find a way of having that mutual trusting. And that's a constant conversation.
Yeah, and the opposite of autonomy is abandonment. So it's that is such a balance on every spectrum of those things. When you talk about those things that we're dealing with as an organization, having that constant conversation, and number 2, you had said for the lesson was to have leaders be owners of impediments. How do you approach that? So if let's say there are these small things we want to do, or that we know can make an impact to the organization, or their organizational impediments, what is your approach? Do you get them to put it in a backlog, or is it just, do they prioritize it? Does the team prioritize it? Who does this?
Yeah.
What does that look
so
like?
The first thing is we have to find them, right? So usually it's like the public secret in the company. So I go in the elevator, talk to people and says, so what's in the way of this organization? And people just tell you.
I know you really do that too.
I do that for sure. And then I love doing that. And then I talk to the leaders and they're like, no, you miss it. You just talked to the wrong person. And then I say, okay, can you please double check and see if I'm wrong? And then they take some time and they come back to me and say, so this seems to be an issue here. So let's first find them and then agree on how feasible is it to fix it. Because let's also be honest, some stuff you can't fix because the regulation don't allow you or any other. So let's find those things that we can actually influence as an organization. And then I would love it if we have a conversation with the product owners and the leadership or any other roles in the organization and just talk about what affects us the most now of the feasible things we can fix, and then just do it once at a time, right? So I think finding the impediments is just a survey or just walking around the floor and you will know, and then hang them on the wall, and then you actually see the pain of the company on the wall. And I do that for companies all the time, and then they're like, oh, if I look at it now, it looks really painful. Yeah, well, that might be the case. And let's find the things we can fix. And the good news is, if you have the executive teams and the people in the organization all together, there is not one thing you can't fix. So you can just start.
Yeah, so I like the information radiator too. Just it captures people's attention, however you color or whatever. So we are winding up on time, and I do have a couple questions that I would like to ask you. What has been what's usually your largest? What's the largest challenge you've dealt with here? Like the largest struggle that you've dealt with in terms of working with all these execs?
So in my private company, we get a lot the question like, we were at this company, we liked the way it looked, can you do exactly the same for us? Or, we love what you said at that conference, can you do exactly the same? Or we want to go for a result compared to a competitor, our biggest competitor, can you just install that for us? So a lot of the questions are around the Obeya rooms that I use in my practice, but it's not about the walls of the Obeya. It's not about the data that we show. It's about the conversation that we have from within. And so the superficial stuff that looks like tips and tricks in Agile, that's what people love the most. But that will not work. So if we want a different behavior, I cannot just, do a miracle. Nobody can. So that's the biggest challenge, I would say.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. I would like to ask you this, and I think it would be a pity if I didn't. So as a person who has worked across several different industries, and you finance, banking, like IT, pharmaceuticals. Those are male dominated industries, and I have my own experiences, but I would like to know, how does it feel and what have you done or experienced? Something that you just share as a female who has been in a lot of these male dominated industries. How do you bring yourself to the table? And I don't even want to just say female or male. I want to say, as a person who doesn't look like the other people in the room, how do you kind of say, okay, here's where we're going, and just have that conversation? Have you faced, any of like, who is this person coming to talk to us, because you're showing up as someone who's different than them? Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure, I get what you're saying. I have clients contacting me and wanted me to come, or somebody from the company asked me to come and was very persistent. And then I came and I walk in this team, and the team is like, shit, we have a girl. That's what they can think. So sure. So I think I'm not necessarily a very girly girl, but of course I'm different. And I think it is about mutual respect. So I think they need to feel my respect, and I would love it if I can feel some of that respect back. And yes, I'm different, and I do have my own personal style. I'm quite direct. I know you know that. But also I have my ways of not only criticizing the team, but also criticizing myself. So just a little bit of me in there might be some inappropriate sense of humor or anything else that can contribute to it. But I'll give you an example. I had a senior leader who was showing up with a behavior, a CEO, that I thought was really, really disrespectful to the rest of the team during some offsite days. And I took him apart twice and just asked him to tone that down, but he didn't do it. So the third time, I just said something about that within the team. And I just said, I think we need to have equal voice here. I really respect your role, but I think we need to hear somebody else as well. And how about if we collect the data from the others first? And afterwards, I saw he didn't like that at all. And afterwards, in the break, he said, if you ever do that to me, I'm so going to fire you. And I listened to him and I said, well, I'm so looking forward to that one. And then he was really quiet. And then he hit me boom. And he said, that's why we need you, girl. And I think, so you find your way, but don't force yourself on it. We are in here for a bigger goal, and the goal is not about us having a job. So I don't know about you, Patricia, but if I think the client really doesn't want me, I don't need that. I did that. That didn't happen to me, but I can provoke them a little bit, and some of them like that, and some of them don't.
Yeah. So show up. You sound like you have a strong why you're there, and also, of course, people can be unable to see past things until you demonstrate. Like, it's a two-way street. It's a trust thing.
Sure.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me. That was and with us, that was a personal question. I think we're able to round up now. So Lindsay, if you could flip to the next slides. And I think the next slides is about learning paths. Yes. So we have a couple minutes left here, which is 1 minute more than usually I have at this point. But Scrum.org promotes continuous learning. We always talk about improvement. The assessments is one way to inspect your knowledge, but to continue learning, we have a lot of these kind of conversations with experts like Leonor. We have a lot of articles that people can read, and there's just structured journeys around Scrum Master, product ownership, leadership that people can follow. So those are on the Scrum.org website, free and available to all. And then the next slide, please. One of the most important things to me about Scrum.org is our community. Not only the professional Scrum trainers, but the community at large of people who are listening. It allows me to have conversations with people like Leonor, and for her to have conversations with you guys in some other ways. Thank you for all of your questions today. Thank you for your time, Leonor. I really appreciate it. And if there are any other things for people to connect with you, you are based in the Netherlands. I know you do travel all around the world.
Yes, I do.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So I have my own company. It's called xagile.com, and you can just contact me through the website. And I'm quite active on LinkedIn as well, so so you can contact me on that way as well.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Scrum on. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.